Hey guys, tonight we're tiptoeing back into the cleanest, shiniest, most wholesome decade in the American scrapbook, the 1950s, and quietly tallying up all the perfectly legal things you could do before lunch that would, today, get you arrested, sued, or sent to prison. Not by being a criminal, not by breaking a single rule. No, simply by living an ordinary Tuesday, with a baby on your lap, a cigarette in the maternity ward, and a chemistry set full of actual uranium under the tree. It means the world that you're here. So if you happen to enjoy drifting off to the gentle hum of historical liability, do tap that like button and subscribe. And tell me down in the comments where you're listening from and which household chemical your grandparents still swear never hurt anybody. Now, get comfortable. Kill the lights, turn the fan on, pull the blanket up under your chin, and maybe set down whatever you happen to be drinking, because in 1955 you would simply be driving home on it. Ever wondered how drunk you were legally allowed to be behind the wheel of a 2-ton Buick? Why the family car treated your infant as a small, warm, unsecured airbag? How a tired mother got her morning energy, and where exactly she bought it, no prescription required? Did anyone child-proof a single thing? The fog truck full of pesticide? A neighborhood parade? And who precisely decided it was fine to mail a grown man a rifle addressed to whatever name he felt like that morning? Congratulations. You have just opened your eyes in suburban America, 1955. There is a casserole in the oven and lead in the walls. The fog truck is coming at dusk. The baby is on something gentle and brown. And not one single thing you are about to do is, at this exact moment in history, against the law. Good luck. You have had 4 old fashions and the car keys are already in your hand. Nobody at the party suggested otherwise. Your host walked you to the driveway, patted the roof of the Buick, and told you to get home safe, which is the full extent of the intervention available to you tonight. You slide behind the wheel, the world pleasantly soft at the edges, and pull onto the road. There is no number anyone could measure against you. There is barely a law, and the law there is can hardly be enforced. The law, such as it is, says you must not drive while intoxicated, which sounds firm until someone tries to define it. There is no breathalyzer in the patrol car, because the breathalyzer has not been invented yet. Robert Borkenstein will not build the thing until 1954, and the officers of this year are still working with their eyes, their nose, and a deep personal opinion about the way you are walking. The standard on the books, in the states that bothered to write one, is a blood alcohol level of 0.15, nearly double what will land you in a cell 70 years from now. You are not near the line. You are, if anything, the line's distant cousin. Officer Dale Pruitt is parked under the elm on Sycamore, and he watches your Buick drift across the center stripe with the serene neutrality of a man watching a leaf do the same thing. He could pull you over. He has the authority. What he does not have is a machine that turns your breath into a number a judge will respect, and without the number the case is just Dale's word against your very rested lawyer. So Dale lifts 2 fingers off the wheel in a small wave and lets you pass. It is less an act of corruption than an act of arithmetic. This is the part that breaks the modern brain. Today, blowing a 0.15 would be roughly the legal equivalent of steering a forklift through a daycare. You would be handcuffed, processed, photographed, and introduced to a court date and an insurance adjuster who speaks to you in a tone usually reserved for arson. Tonight, it is a Tuesday. The drunk driver is not yet a monster on a public service announcement, because the public service announcement has not been written, because the public has not yet been told that any of this is a problem. The car itself does nothing to help. It is 2 tons of Detroit steel with a dashboard made of more steel, a steering column pointed at your chest like an accusation, and a complete absence of anything you might call a restraint. The Buick is not built to survive a crash. It is built to look magnificent right up until the crash and then fold like a disappointed accordion. You float home inside it, trusting reflexes that are, at this moment, roughly the consistency of warm gravy. Mrs. Antonelli, 3 houses down, hears you take the corner and does not look up from her dishes, because the sound of a neighbor parking with enthusiasm is the sound of a normal evening. You clip the trash can. You apologize to the trash can. You get the car into something adjacent to the driveway, leave it at a jaunty diagonal, and consider the whole operation a success, which, by the only standard available to you, it is. The thing that ends this is not a sudden attack of conscience. It is paperwork and physics, arriving slowly. New York passes the first implied consent law in 1953. The quiet idea that holding a license means agreeing to be tested. The breathalyzer spreads through the decade like a rumor. The number .08 is still years away, and the angry mothers who will one day force the country to care are not angry yet, because their children are still alive. For now, you are home. The keys land in the dish by the door. Nobody will ever know, because there is, as yet, nothing to know. You settle the baby on your lap in the front seat and your husband starts the engine. There is no other place to put her. The car did not come with belts, and the idea of a separate seat for a child would strike the salesman as a joke. Your toddler stands on the bench beside you, hands on the dashboard, watching the road like a tiny foreman. When the car takes a corner, you put out an arm. That arm is the entire safety system, and everyone considers it sufficient. The front seat is a long, slick bench, upholstered in something that wipes clean, which is the closest the car comes to admitting that children exist. There is no buckle for the baby because there is no buckle for anyone. Seat belts are an eccentric option a few nervous engineers keep mentioning, and the first state to actually require them, New York again, will not do so until 1984, a date so distant it might as well be the moon. The standard restraint system, as understood by every parent in the country, is a mother's outstretched arm deployed at the instant of braking, a maneuver later generations will correctly recognize as doing absolutely nothing. Your daughter rides on your lap, her head positioned conveniently at windshield height. The toddler stands with both palms on the dash, narrating the scenery, a small, unsecured passenger with the structural future of a thrown cantaloupe. When your husband brakes for the light on Magnolia, you fling your arm across the children with the reflexes of a circus act, and everyone agrees this was protective. It was not protective, it was choreography. Compare this to the modern infant, who cannot leave the hospital parking lot until strapped into a 5-point harness rated by engineers, inspected by a fire marshal, and aimed backward until roughly the age of college. The baby beside you has none of that. The baby beside you has a mother, a bench seat, and the great good fortune to be soft. The car seat as a concept will not become law for decades, and the notion that a baby needs its own throne bolted to the chassis would strike your husband as the absolute summit of coddling. Grandma Vivian rides in the back, a cigarette going, the window cracked 1 inch for ventilation that accomplishes nothing. She holds the second baby loosely in the crook of an elbow, the way you would hold a football you did not particularly respect. When the car corners, Vivian shifts the baby to her other arm without breaking her sentence, a gesture so practiced it has the calm of a card dealer. Nobody in this car is wearing anything. Nobody in this car is attached to anything. The whole family is essentially loose, cheerful, and unsecured cargo with opinions. The dashboard, meanwhile, is a wall of painted metal studded with knobs that protrude like little fists. In a sudden stop, the interior is less a safe space than a museum of blunt objects, each one waiting patiently at exactly head height. The men who designed it were thinking about the chrome, the fins, the way the speedometer glows a friendly green. They were not thinking about your skull, because your skull was not, at the design stage, a priority. And yet you arrive home every time. This is the logic of the decade. The baby was fine, therefore the baby was safe. The two are treated as one sentence, when in fact they are strangers who have never met. You carry the sleeping toddler inside, unbuckled from nothing, lifted off a seat that held her with the firm grip of an open hand. You put her to bed. You did everything right by the standards of this year, which asked of you only that you have an arm and the willingness to use it. Tomorrow you will do it again, down to the market, the baby on your lap, the toddler at the dash, the whole soft, unsecured circus rolling down Main Street at a confident 30, protected by upholstery and luck and the warm certainty that nothing has gone wrong yet. You walk into the drugstore for a little something to get you through the day, and the man behind the counter knows exactly what you mean. He reaches for the inhaler without a prescription, because none is required. Inside it is amphetamine, though the box prefers other words. You are tired, you would like to be less tired, and possibly a bit thinner by Friday. And the pharmacy has a clean chemical answer for all three. You pay, you pocket it, and you are home before the first wave of energy arrives. The inhaler is called Benzedrine, and it has sat on open shelves since 1933, sold as a thing to clear a stuffy nose. Inside is a cotton strip soaked in amphetamine, And somewhere along the way, the nation quietly noticed it did considerably more than clear a nose. You do not need a doctor. You do not need a reason. You need a nickel and the ability to say the word decongestant with a straight face. The pharmacist, a tidy man named Mr. Lindqvist, rings it up beside the aspirin and the licorice, because to him it is exactly as ordinary as both. For the woman who prefers the effect in pill form, the options are generous. There is straight amphetamine, sold since 1938, and there is the newer marvel, Deximal, which weds an amphetamine to lift you up with a barbiturate to set you back down, an upper and a downer honeymooning in a single pill. It is handed out for anxiety, for low mood, and above all for weight, on the cheerful theory that a woman too wired to eat is a woman meeting her goals. Picture a modern doctor fusing Adderall and a sleeping pill into one capsule and calling it a tonic for the nerves. Today that doctor loses a license. This year it is simply the considerate thing to do. You take yours with your coffee, which is itself a stimulant, so that breakfast is now 2 stimulants in a trench coat. The house has never been cleaner. The floor is waxed, the silver is polished, the children's shirts are pressed with a precision bordering on the surgical, and you have reorganized the linen closet twice since dawn. Your heart is going like a hummingbird that has made several poor decisions, but the kitchen gleams, and a gleaming kitchen is the entire performance review. Miss us. Calloway next door is on the same program, and you can tell, because she waves to you over the fence with the bright, restless, and vibrating intensity of a woman who has not blinked since Tuesday. The two of you hold a conversation at the property line that covers 19 topics in 4 minutes and resolves not one. This is friendship in the chemical age. You are both magnificent. You are both slightly not okay. The genius of the diet pill is that it does not feel like a vice. A martini is a vice. A cigarette is, at worst, a glamorous habit. But a small white pill pressed into your palm by a physician, taken to be a better wife and a thinner one, feels less like indulgence than diligence. You are not getting high. You are managing the household. The fact that you are managing it at the speed of a startled greyhound is, if anything, a quiet point of pride. The FDA will eventually notice. In 1959, it pulls the Benzedrine inhaler off the open shelf and makes it prescription only, the first faint admission that perhaps amphetamine on the aspirin rack was a touch casual. But that is the future, and the future is a downer, and you have specifically taken something for that. For now, you stand in your spotless kitchen at the tail end of the morning, the pep starting its long slide toward the late afternoon crash, and you reach, just to smooth the landing, for the other little bottle, the one that brings you gently down. Up at dawn, down at dusk, the whole cabinet a tiny private weather system you operate by hand. The doctor approves, the pharmacy restocks, the kitchen, you will note, has never once complained. The baby has been crying for an hour, and the teething has only begun. You go to the cabinet and take down the small brown bottle every household keeps for exactly this. It is paregoric, a tincture of opium, and the label includes a dose for infants printed in calm, official type. You measure a spoonful the way your mother did and her mother before her. The crying stops, the house goes quiet. Nobody here considers this anything other than ordinary, responsible parenting on a difficult night. Paregoric is opium that has been to finishing school. It is camphorated, flavoured, diluted, and bottled in respectable brown glass, and it sits in the cabinet between the iodine and the cough syrup, like a reputable member of the household. The label does not whisper or apologise. It states, in calm official type, the dose appropriate for an infant, because the manufacturer assumes, correctly, that you will be giving it to one. The logic is airtight in the way that only doomed logic is. The baby is in pain. Opium relieves pain. Therefore, the baby receives opium and sleeps the deep, untroubled sleep of someone just gently introduced to the poppy. You did not invent this. Your mother dosed you from the same brown bottle, and her mother dosed her, back through a long, quiet line of exhausted women who wanted the crying to stop and found that it could. Miss us. Pearl Hooker at the corner pharmacy keeps it stocked low on the shelf and sells it the way she sells teething rings, with a sympathetic cluck and no paperwork. When you set the bottle on her counter, she slides it into a paper sack and nods like a colleague. There is no register of who buys it, no limit on how often, no second thought from anyone in the transaction. It is simply what you reach for when the alternative is another night awake. Try to explain this to a modern parent and watch the colour leave their face. Today, a measured spoonful of opium tincture given to an infant is the kind of thing that arrives with a social worker, a police report, and a courtroom. The same act that earns you a custody hearing now earned you this year a full night of sleep and the muted admiration of neighbours who could see that your baby was, blessedly, not screaming. And paregoric is only the headliner. The shelf around it is a small narcotic orchestra. There are codeine syrups for the cough that lingers, soothing tonics whose soothing comes from sources nobody examines too closely, and the same barbiturates the grown-ups take, scaled down on a hopeful guess. The whole cabinet runs on trust and tradition, two materials that hold up beautifully right until the moment they do not. You measure the dose exactly as the label says, no more, because you are careful. And being careful here means following the instructions on a bottle of opium with precision. The spoon goes in. The small face unclenches. The fists that fought the world all evening go slowly soft, and the baby drifts into a sleep so complete it would alarm you, if alarm were a thing anyone had taught you to feel about this. The house settles. The kitchen light goes off. You sit a moment in the new silence, the brown bottle back in its place between the iodine and the cough syrup, and you feel only the ordinary relief of a parent whose child has finally stopped hurting. The bottle did its job. The label was followed. Nobody, by the standards of the year, has done a single thing wrong. It will take decades for the country to look at that brown bottle and see what it really was, and tonight is not one of those decades. The cabinet is full, the baby is sleeping, and the most dangerous object in the house is wearing a friendly label and minding its manners between two harmless neighbours on the second shelf. You hear the truck before you see it, a low diesel grind rolling up the block in the early evening. Behind it spreads a thick white cloud that fills the street from curb to curb. The children are already running for it, the way they run for the ice cream man, disappearing into the fog and shrieking with delight. You stand on the porch and wave. The cloud is DDT. The town sprays it for mosquitoes, and letting it settle on your skin is understood to be a small civic blessing. The truck belongs to the town, or the county, or some agency with a reassuring name, and its whole job is to roll through the residential streets after supper pumping out a fog of DDT to kill the mosquitoes. Nobody questions this, because the mosquito is the enemy and DDT is the hero, freshly home from the war where it knocked out the lice and the malaria, and saved, by every account, a great many soldiers. A chemical with a war record like that does not get cross-examined by a suburb. It gets a parade, and it behaves like a celebrity at a parade too. The fog does not stay politely in the gutters where it was aimed. It spreads, thick, white, and faintly sweet, drifting across the lawns, slipping in through the screen doors, settling onto the laundry on the line, onto the lemonade sweating on the porch rail, onto the open, shrieking mouths of the children mid-sprint. It coats the rose bushes. It powders the windshields. It lies down on the grass like a fog that has decided to stay for the evening and see how things develop. You do not go inside. You do not pull the children in. You lift a hand to Earl. Earl is the man driving it, a sun-creased fellow in a cap who has run this route for years, and he lifts one gloved hand off the wheel in return, the unhurried wave of a man delivering something everyone is glad to receive. He has the manner of the milkman, the easy civic friendliness of a person whose arrival is good news. The fact that the something he delivers is a fog of carcinogen is not a thought available to anyone on the street, least of all Earl, who drives slowly so the children can keep up, because the children, of course, adore him. To them, the fog truck is the ice cream truck's stranger cousin, the one that sells nothing and explains nothing and simply appears at dusk to turn the whole block into a cloud. They run behind it in a shrieking pack, vanishing into the white, reappearing, vanishing again, playing the most magical game the summer offers, which is the game of being briefly invisible. They hold their arms out, they breathe it in on purpose. Some of them will remember this evening for the rest of their lives as one of the pure joys of being a child, the night they chased the fog down the block and their mother waved from the porch and nobody told them to stop. Nobody calls it poison. It is called mosquito control, and mosquito control is a public good, and a public good is not a thing a reasonable person hides from. There is even a story going around, half believed and never checked, that the spraying protects against polio. The connection is invented out of nothing, but it does not need to be true. It only needs to be comforting, because polio is the thing that empties the swimming pools every August and puts the neighbour's boy in a brace, and a parent frightened of polio will stand their child directly in a chemical cloud if a man in a uniform implies that it helps. The fog, for its part, makes no promises and accepts all the credit. It asks for nothing. It simply arrives and settles and waits. Across the country, though she is nobody you have heard of, a woman named Rachel Carson has begun to notice the birds. The eagles are not hatching. The falcons are laying eggs with shells gone thin as paper, eggs that crack under the weight of the mother who made them. And Carson is starting to follow the thread back from the silent nest to the very fog now drifting past your porch and into the worms and the songbirds and everything that eats. She is years from finishing the book that will name it. Tonight she is only a scientist with a worry, and the fog has not heard of her either. So you stand on the porch with your iced tea and watch your children disappear into the white, and you feel the particular contentment of a mother in a good town on a soft evening, a town that sends a truck to take care of its own. Earl reaches the corner and turns, his cloud trailing behind him like a long white tail, and a fresh pack of children spills off a fresh porch to meet him. The street smells of cut grass and that sweet chemical sweetness that means a comfortable night ahead. The fog settles over the lawn and the sandbox and the wading pool, patient, odorless, and unhurried, lying down among the children to wait, with all the time in the world, for someone to figure out what it is. You are repainting the nursery before the baby comes, and you have chosen a cheerful colour from a can that promises durability and a hard, washable shine. That shine is lead. Nobody tells you this because nobody considers it worth mentioning. The paint on every windowsill and crib rail in the country is the same. You cut in around the window the baby will later teethe on, roll 2 coats onto the walls she will drag her hands along, and step back to admire the freshest, brightest room in the house. Lead is in the paint because lead is what makes paint good. It spreads smooth, covers in fewer coats, dries to a hard washable shell, and holds its colour against years of sun and scrubbing. The men who make the paint know exactly what is in it, and they advertise the durability with pride, because durability is the selling point and the cause of the durability is the lead. There is even a cheerful boy painted on some of the cans, the picture of health, recommending the product to his mother. So you paint. You choose a soft buttery yellow, because you do not yet know if it is a boy or a girl, and yellow offends no one, and you roll it onto the walls with real care. You take extra time on the windowsill, sanding it smooth, not knowing the sanding lifts a fine sweet dust into the air you are breathing. The crib gets a coat too, the spindles and the rail. The rail a teething baby will eventually gnaw the way teething babies gnaw everything within reach. This is the quiet trap of the whole arrangement. Lead is sweet. It genuinely tastes faintly of sugar, the worst possible quality for a poison to have, because it means the baby is not repelled by the flaking chip but delighted by it. The chip comes off the windowsill in a child's curious fingers and goes, as all things do, directly into the mouth. The nursery you decorated with love is, molecule by molecule, a buffet. The damage lead does to a small developing brain is permanent and invisible, which is the combination that lets it work undisturbed for so long. There is no fog, no smell, no dramatic moment. There is only a child who, years on, struggles in ways nobody connects to the buttery yellow walls of the room where everyone agreed he slept so soundly. Cause and effect are separated by a decade, and a decade is long enough for any culprit to walk free. Your house is not unusual. 3 out of 4 American homes built before the ban will contain lead paint, because the ban does not arrive until 1978, more than 20 years from the evening you stand here admiring your work with a roller in your hand. Every nursery on the street is the same nursery. The poison is not a scandal because the poison is universal, and a universal poison is simply called a building material. Mr. Dwyer at the hardware store sold you the second can without comment, ringing it up beside the brushes and the turpentine and asking when the baby is due. He is a kind man. He has lead paint in his own children's rooms. He would be genuinely baffled to learn that one day removing this exact paint will require licensed workers in respirators and sealed plastic sheeting and a permit, that the stuff he sells by the gallon will be reclassified as a hazard you cannot legally disturb without training. You finish the second coat as the light goes orange in the window. The nursery glows, fresh and bright and ready, the cheerful room you made for the child who is coming. You breathe in the smell of new paint, that smell everyone loves, the smell of a fresh start, and you do not know, because there is no way for you to know, that the brightest, hardest, and most beautiful thing in the room is the one thing in it quietly working against the child it was painted for. You pull into the service station and a man in a bow tie fills the tank while you stay seated. You ask for the good stuff, the premium, and the good stuff is leaded. The fumes that rise off the nozzle are part of the smell of being alive in this decade, the smell of every garage and every street. Lead is in the gasoline because it makes the engine run smoother, and that is the end of the public conversation about it. You tip the man a quarter and drive off. Tetraethyl lead goes into the gasoline to stop the engine from knocking, that rattling ping a high-compression engine makes when the fuel light's a fraction too early. A little lead and the knock simply vanishes. The engine runs smooth, quiet, and strong. The ride goes velvet, and the motorist is content. The men who first brewed it knew almost immediately that something was wrong, because the workers at the plant where they made it began to stagger, then to hallucinate, then to die, the factory floor producing madmen as a byproduct of producing fuel. None of that reached the pump. The product was given a friendlier name and sold to the entire nation, and the entire nation filled up and drove off, grateful for the smoothness. The station itself is a cheerful place, all red and white and chrome, with a little bell that dings when your tyres cross the hose. Buddy comes trotting out before you have got your wallet open, a polite kid of maybe 17 in a crisp uniform and a bow tie, and he does the entire ceremony for you. He fills the tank, holding the nozzle with the casual authority of a boy who does this 400 times a day. He lifts the hood and checks the oil and shows you the dipstick like a sommelier presenting the cork. He wipes the windshield in long practiced arcs, leans in for the corners, asks about your day. And the whole time, rising invisibly off the open mouth of the tank, a thin, sweet haze of vaporized lead hangs in the warm air between his face and yours. You breathe it. He breathes it. Nobody names it at all. He has breathed it since breakfast and will breathe it until the station locks up, and not one person has thought to call this a hazard, because the word hazard has not yet been pointed in this direction. Buddy is, in plain fact, standing in the single most dangerous spot for a mile in any direction, and he is whistling. He counts your change out of the little chrome dispenser on his belt, drops it warm into your palm, and pats the hood twice to tell you he is done, sending you off with the easy good cheer of a boy who believes, not incorrectly, that he has the best job on the block. But the tank Buddy fills is only the start of the lead's journey, because the real machinery of the thing is the exhaust. Every car on every road is burning this fuel and breathing the lead right back out the tailpipe as a fine grey particulate, and that particulate does not vanish. It drifts down, it settles on the streets and the sidewalks, on the front lawns and the playground sand, on the tomato plants in the back gardens, and the wash on the lines. A slow, invisible snowfall that never melts and never stops, falling on the whole country at once, every hour of every day. The children play directly in it. They build mud pies out of dirt that is quietly silvered with it. They come in for supper wearing a faint dust of it on their hands, and you scrub the visible dirt away and never think about the rest, because there is no rest to think about, not yet. This is the strange grace a poison earns by touching everyone equally, which is that it stops looking like a poison at all. A thing that only some children breathe is a scandal. A thing that every child breathes, in every town, all day, is simply the air. It hides in the most public way imaginable, dusted evenly across the entire population, so that no doctor bent over any one struggling child would ever think to ask about the gas tank, because the gas tank is everywhere and everywhere is nowhere. The lead is not lurking in the shadows. It is out in the open, smiling, sponsoring the whole decade. You pull back onto the road with the engine running sweet. No knock, no ping, just that satisfying velvet hum the lead brought you, and you feel the small, clean pleasure of a machine working exactly as it should. Behind you, the tailpipe adds your fair contribution to the national snowfall, falling softly on the town. It is a beautiful day. You roll the window down to let it in, and the breeze comes through warm and faintly sweet, carrying the good, clean smell of the fuel that everyone agrees, with total and untroubled confidence, is perfectly fine. You set up the ironing board in the kitchen and lay your husband's shirts across it. Under the hot iron rests a pad of asbestos, because asbestos does not burn, and a material that does not burn is exactly what you want near a hot iron. The same fibre lines, your oven mitts, and the hood of the dryer at the salon, and the tiles on the ceiling above you. You press the collars flat, set the iron down on its safe grey pad, and think nothing of it, because there is nothing yet to think. Asbestos is a miracle, and that is not sarcasm, that is the sales pitch, and the honest truth at once. It is a mineral that comes out of the ground as soft fibers you can weave like cloth, and it does not burn, does not melt, does not conduct heat, and does not wear out. For a country in love with a modern kitchen and terrified of fire, it is the answer to a prayer. So it goes into everything, quietly, by the ton, wherever heat and flame are concerns, which in a house is more or less everywhere. It is in the pad under your iron, and the mitts you pull the roast out with. It is wrapped around the basement pipes and packed into the walls as insulation, and pressed into the tiles on the floor and the ceiling. It is in the hairdryer hood at the beauty parlour, blowing warm, fibrous air across the scalps of half the women in town. It is even sold in a box at Christmas as artificial snow, a fluffy white asbestos you drape on the tree and sprinkle on the mantel, and let the children fling around the living room like the first magical flurry of the season. The danger is not the asbestos sitting still. The danger is the asbestos disturbed, the fibres that break loose and float free and get breathed deep into the lungs, where they lodge and stay and do their slow patient work over 30 or 40 years. That long delay is the whole problem. Nothing happens today. Nothing happens this decade. The bill comes due in the distant future, addressed to a person who has long since forgotten the ironing pad, and so the connection is nearly impossible to see while you stand in the kitchen pressing a collar. Missus. Lingren at the salon shakes out a fresh asbestos cape and snaps it around your neck before the colour goes on, the cape that guards your good blouse from the chemicals, and she has snapped that cape 1,000 times, releasing a small private cloud with each snap, breathing her whole career one fibre at a time. She is proud of the salon. It is clean, modern, and fireproof. She would be amazed to learn that fireproof in this case is doing some very heavy lifting. Install this material today and you meet a wall of federal regulation, licensed abatement crews, sealed containment, and the kind of legal liability that has funded entire law firms. But none of that has happened yet. Right now it is simply the smart, safe, modern choice, the responsible thing to put between your family and a fire. You finish the ironing, set the hot iron down on its safe grey pad, and the pad does its job perfectly, exactly as advertised, not so much as scorching. You hang the shirts, you wipe the counter. The house is fireproof from the basement pipes to the ceiling tiles, a fortress against the one danger everyone can see, built entirely out of the one danger nobody can. Upstairs, last December's artificial snow is still boxed in the closet, the soft white asbestos you will haul out again this year and let the children scatter under the tree. They love it. It looks just like the real thing, drifting down through the lights, settling on the branches, catching in their hair. You will take a photograph of them in it, laughing, dusted in white, the happiest fake blizzard a fireproof household could possibly ask for. Your son has asked for the Gilbert Atomic Energy Lab, and you have bought it, because science is the future and the future is the whole point of giving a boy a chemistry set. Inside the case, packed in a neat cardboard tray, are 4 samples of genuine uranium ore and a working Geiger counter to hunt for more. There is a government pamphlet on prospecting. He spreads it all across the dining table, switches on the counter, and you let him, because this is education, and education is wholesome. The Gilbert Atomic Energy Lab is not a toy that pretends to do science. It does science, real science, with real radioactive material, because the atom is the most exciting thing in the world right now, and a boy who understands it is a boy with a future. The set costs $49.50, a serious sum, the price of a small appliance, and that price is part of the appeal. This is not a cap gun, this is an investment in tomorrow. Inside the handsome case, laid out in a fitted tray, are 4 samples of genuine uranium-bearing ore, actual chunks of the actual rock that actual bombs are made from. There is a Geiger counter, a working one, that clicks faster as it nears the samples, so your son can wave it over the ore and hear the radiation announce itself. There is a cloud chamber for watching particles streak past, an electroscope, a spinthariscope, and a small government pamphlet titled Prospecting for Uranium, in case the boy should wish to go find more in the actual ground. You buy it, of course, because what kind of parent stands between a child and his education? He sets it up on the good dining table and switches on the counter, and the room fills with the busy clicking of a device detecting the genuine article. He sorts the ore into little piles. He reads the comic book that comes packed in the lid, in which a cheerful cartoon fellow splits the atom for the amusement of all. He is, by every measure the era cares about, wholesome, curious, and well-behaved. Picture handing a child a box of uranium today. Picture the toy aisle stocking it between the building blocks and the dolls. The product would be recalled before lunch, the company would cease to exist by dinner, and several federal agencies would hold a joint press conference. The very idea sits so far outside the modern bargain that it reads as a prank. But Gilbert is a respected name, the maker of the beloved Erector set, and this is simply their most ambitious product, the one for the serious young man. In fairness, and the fairness matters, the uranium in the set is not especially dangerous so long as it stays in its little containers. No worse than an afternoon of strong sun. The horror is not really the dose. The horror is the casualness, the total absence of anyone in the chain who pause to ask whether selling radioactive ore to 9-year-olds might warrant a second look. The dose is fine. The civilization is the part that should concern you. The set is a commercial flop, as it happens, not because anyone objects to the uranium, but because it costs too much and asks too much, wanting a boy who genuinely cares to study physics rather than blow things up. Fewer than 5,000 sell, and the product vanishes after 1951, remembered now mostly as the most dangerous toy ever marketed. But tonight, it is the marvel of the household. Your son, a serious boy named Gordon, runs the Geiger counter over the salt shaker, the doorknob, the cat, delighted whenever the clicking quickens, hunting invisible energy across the dining room while the casserole cools. You watch from the doorway, proud of his curiosity, pleased you could give him the very best, a real laboratory of his own. The little chunks of uranium sit in their tray under the good lamp, glittering faintly, the most modern present a forward-looking family could buy, clicking softly into the future. The thermometer slips and cracks on the bathroom tile, and a bead of mercury escapes and breaks into a dozen smaller beads. Your daughter is delighted. You let her chase them with a fingertip, nudging the silver drops together into one fat ball that rolls across her open palm without wetting it. Everyone has done this. Mercury is the magic metal, the liquid mirror, and a broken thermometer is treated as a small windfall of entertainment rather than a spill that requires anyone to leave the room. Mercury is the one metal that has decided not to be solid, and that single act of rebellion is why the whole house loves it and nobody respects it. It lives in the thermometer under your tongue, in the thermostat on the wall, in the silent tilt switch that turns on the basement light, in the soft grey fillings packed into half the molars in town. It is cheap, common, and useful, and when a thermometer breaks, which thermometers are forever doing, the little silver soul of it spills out across the tile and becomes, in the space of 1 second, the most interesting object anyone in the room has ever seen. Your daughter forgets entirely that anything is broken. The bead hits the floor and shatters into a constellation of smaller beads, and the smaller beads go rolling off in every direction with a will of their own, hiding in the grout, gathering under the radiator, racing one another across the linoleum like a dropped handful of tiny mirrors that have somewhere to be. She chases them on her knees, herding them with one careful fingertip, and when she finally noses 2 of them together, they leap into each other and merge with a soundless little jump, 2 drops becoming one fatter drop that sits in her palm and trembles, and throws back a curved silver picture of her own delighted face. You watch her do it. You do not stop her. Why would you, when you did this exact thing on this exact floor when you were her size? That is the trap of it, really. The way the danger and the delight are the very same object. The bead is genuinely wonderful. It is heavier than it has any right to be. A marble that weighs like a ball bearing, cool, dry, and perfectly reflective. And it performs the one trick a child never tires of, which is to break apart and come back together on command. Nothing about it says poison. It has no smell to warn you and no taste to spit out and no sting to snatch your hand back, and so the part of it that is quietly slipping in through the skin and settling into the soft tissue of a small developing brain does its work entirely unnoticed. Behind the trick, while everyone is busy watching the trick, even the language helps it hide. People say mad as a hatter without hearing it, the way you say any worn-out phrase, and yet the phrase is a coroner's report. It comes from the hat makers, the men who used mercury to turn fur into felt and breathed the fumes year after year in close hot workrooms until their hands shook and their words slurred and their minds came quietly apart. A whole trade of poisoned craftsmen folded down into a cheerful little idiom you might use to describe an eccentric aunt. The warning is sitting right there inside the saying. Nobody can hear it anymore. Uncle Ray certainly cannot. He has come for the weekend, and he wanders in at the sound of the commotion, and the moment he sees the silver beads scattered on the tile, his whole face lights up, because Uncle Ray loves this trick more than anyone alive. He digs into his trouser pocket and produces, of all things, a small glass vial of his own mercury, which he carries the way other men carry a pocket knife or a lucky coin, and he tips a fresh fat bead out onto the kitchen table to show your daughter the grown-up version, 2 big drops rushing together into one. His hands are not quite steady as he does it. There is a fine tremor in them now, a small constant shiver the family has gently agreed to call getting older. You all lean in over the table to watch the drops marry, charmed, 4 faces reflected in one wobbling silver mirror, and not one of you connects the shake in Ray's hands to the trick in Ray's hands. When the show is finished, you fetch a damp cloth and wipe the table clean, and you rinse the cloth in the sink, and the last of the mercury goes swirling brightly down the drain and into the pipe and off toward the river, on its way to wherever it is that such things are politely assumed to go. Your daughter washes her hands at the sink beside you, because you told her to, and not because anyone in the house is the least bit worried. And then she pads back off into her afternoon, carrying with her the warm private memory of the day. She held a little piece of liquid mirror in her own hand, and it did, obediently and beautifully, exactly what she asked. The shoe salesman laces the new Oxfords onto your son and walks him over to the tall wooden machine in the corner. He steps onto the platform, slides his feet into the slot at the bottom, and the 3 of you lean over the portholes at the top to look. There, glowing green, are the bones of his feet inside the leather. The salesman points out the wiggle room at the toe. The machine is an X-ray tube. The store has one because every store has one, and you check both shoes twice. The machine is a shoe-fitting fluoroscope, a handsome wooden cabinet about chest-high with a sloped front and a faint electrical hum, and at its heart, pointed straight up, is a live X-ray tube. You step onto the little platform, slide your feet into the slot at the base, and the tube switches on beneath your soles and fires its beam up through the leather and the wool and the actual living bones of your feet, throwing the picture onto a glass screen at the top. There are 3 viewing ports up there, and this is the detail that tells you everything about the era, because one port is for you, one is for the salesman, and the third is simply for anybody else who happens to be standing about and would enjoy a look. Peering at the glowing green skeleton of a stranger's foot is considered good, clean fun. Everybody gets a turn. There are more than 10,000 of these cabinets humming away in shoe departments across the country right now, at the very crest of their fashion, because the machine is modern, the machine is scientific, and above all, the machine sells shoes. Nothing closes a sale like proof. Mr. Petrie, the salesman, is a brisk and friendly man in shirt sleeves and a tape measure, and he laces the new Oxfords onto your son and walks him to the cabinet with the showmanship of a man unveiling the future. He sets the boy's feet in the slot, flicks the switch, and waves the 3 of you in over the ports, and there they are. The small bones of your son's feet, glowing a soft radioactive green inside the new shoes, the toes wiggling on command, the whole foot lit up like a paper lantern. "Look at that," says Mr. Petrie. "Room to grow." What is actually happening, underneath the wonder of it, is that your son is standing on top of an unshielded X-ray tube, with about a millimetre of aluminum between the beam and his bare soles, taking a dose of hard radiation up into his growing legs, in order to settle a question Mr. Petrie could have answered by pressing his thumb on the end of the shoe. And the cabinet does not aim politely upward only. It leaks in every direction, spraying its invisible light out across the sales floor, into the waiting chairs, into the stockroom, dosing the legs and the bellies and the unborn futures of everyone who drifts within a few feet of it. It doses Mr. Petrie worst of all, because Mr. Petrie does not pass within a few feet of it once. He stands beside it all day, every day, year upon year, fitting one child after another, leaning in for every single viewing, soaking the stuff up the way a man at the beach soaks up the sun, except that Mr. Petrie does not tan and does not burn and has no earthly way of knowing he has been at the beach at all. The children naturally think it is the finest thing in the whole store. There is a notice somewhere advising that a person ought to limit themselves to a sensible number of viewings in a year, and absolutely no one obeys it, or could even tell you where it is tacked up. The moment your back is turned, the boy has a hand jammed into the slot to watch the bones of his own fingers wiggle on the screen. He runs his feet through again just to feel the hum. His sister wants her turn, and then she wants another. It is a radiation source dressed up as a peep show, dressed up as a science exhibit, parked in the corner of a shop between the sock display and the polish rack, and against the plain animal delight of watching your own skeleton move, it is winning in a walk. So you check both of your son's shoes, and then you check them again, because the machine is right there, and a look costs nothing, and the green bones wiggle obligingly inside the leather each time. Mister. Petrie nods, pleased, and goes off to wrap the box. Your son hops down off the platform and inevitably asks to do it one more time. And you say yes, of course, because it is a special outing and the machine is plainly the best part of it. He climbs back on. He fits his feet into the slot and bends over the port with his whole small face glowing faintly in the light off the screen, and the tube hums up to life beneath him one more time, bathing the bones of a boy in the newest, brightest, and most thoroughly modern light the store has to offer. You have just had the baby, and a nurse brings you a cigarette along with the congratulations. You light it in the maternity ward, propped against the pillows, the ashtray balanced on the blanket near the bassinet. Your obstetrician smokes too, in his office, between appointments. The cigarette brand you prefer ran an advertisement featuring a doctor, and that felt reassuring rather than strange. There is no warning on the pack and no sign on the wall, because there is nothing on the subject anyone yet thinks worth warning you about. She lights it for you. You lie back against the pillows, the newborn asleep in the bassinet an arm's length away, and you smoke, and the smoke drifts up toward the ceiling and across to the next bed, where the woman who delivered an hour after you is doing exactly the same thing. The ward has ashtrays. The ward expects you to need them. Smoking is not a vice here. Smoking is the texture of life, the thing everyone does everywhere, in the office and the elevator and the movie theatre and the doctor's waiting room and, yes, the hospital. Your obstetrician smokes between deliveries. Your paediatrician smokes while weighing the baby. The very advertisements that sold you your brand featured a man in a white coat assuring you that more doctors smoke this cigarette than any other, and that did not strike you as alarming. It struck you as a recommendation. Nobody has told you any of this is dangerous, because, officially, nobody knows. The studies are underway, the suspicion is gathering in the medical journals, but the Surgeon General will not issue the famous report until 1964, and until that report lands, the public position is that cigarettes are, at worst, a pleasant habit, and, at best, actively soothing. There is no warning on the pack. There is no warning anywhere. The absence of a warning is taken, reasonably enough, as the absence of a danger. So the smoke fills the maternity ward, and it fills the nursery down the hall, and it fills the car on the drive home with the windows up and the baby on your lap, a small sealed chamber of second-hand smoke that no one regards as anything but cozy. The cigarette was even pitched to you while you were pregnant, in advertisements promising it would calm your nerves and keep the weight down, and you may well have smoked through all 9 months on the gentle assurance that it was good for precisely that. Try lighting up in a maternity ward today and you would be escorted from the building, possibly by security, and in many places you cannot smoke in a car with a child in it without breaking a law written precisely because of rooms like this one. The hospital that hands you a celebratory cigarette here is, by the standards of the country it is about to become, committing a small crime against everyone in the ward, including itself. The nurse, Miss Dunleavy, comes by to empty the ashtray and refill the water and straighten the blanket, and she taps your ash into the little metal tray with the easy competence of a woman who has done it 10,000 times, because tending a smoking new mother is simply part of the job. She does not cough, she does not crack a window. She has worked in this smoke for 20 years and considers the ward, with its gleaming floors and fresh linens, the very picture of health. You finish the cigarette and stub it out in the tray on the blanket, a few inches from the sleeping newborn, and you feel nothing but content, a new mother resting in a clean, bright ward at the dawn of a modern age. The smoke hangs in a soft layer near the ceiling, catching the afternoon light. Down the hall, a dozen other mothers are exhaling toward a dozen other ceilings, and the whole floor breathes together, warm, hazed, and entirely sure that nothing here could possibly be the matter. You cannot sleep, and so you take a Seconal, one of the bright capsules the doctor handed over without much ceremony and the pharmacy refills without comment. It is a barbiturate, a chemical off switch, and half the women on your street keep an identical bottle behind the mirror. On a bad night, you might give a smaller dose to a child who will not settle. The bottle does not come with a lecture. It comes with a cotton plug and a friendly label, and you treat it about as casually as aspirin. The doctor wrote the prescription with no more ceremony than he would use for a cough, and the bright red capsules live in the cabinet alongside the aspirin and the amphetamines from this morning. The whole shelf a tidy seesaw of up in the day and down at night. The barbiturate is the great calming chemical of the age, handed out for sleeplessness, for nerves, for the vague, unnamed restlessness of a life that looks perfect and does not always feel it. It comes in friendly colours with friendly nicknames, the reds and the blues and the yellows, traded between neighbours and tucked into handbags, as ordinary as a tin of mints. You do not think of yourself as taking a powerful sedative. You think of yourself as getting a good night's sleep, which the doctor recommended. What nobody dwells on is the arithmetic of the barbiturate, which is unforgiving in a way the cheerful capsule does not advertise. The dose that helps you sleep and the dose that stops you waking are not far apart, and the gap narrows alarmingly if you have had a drink, which you have, because it is evening, and you are a person. The red capsule and the nightcap do their quiet math together, with no drama, in your own bed. On a rough night, when a child will not settle, you might tip out a smaller dose for him too, because the same logic that quiets a baby with opium will quiet an older child with a barbiturate, and a sleeping household is the goal toward which all this chemistry is bent. Mrs. Ferris next door swears by it for her boy, measures it into a spoon of jam, and reports that he goes down like a lamb. You file the tip away. The whole neighbourhood medicates itself to sleep and compares methods over the fence in the morning. Try this today, and the words controlled substance enter the conversation, followed shortly by the words and your children. The barbiturate is now tightly scheduled, prescribed with caution, counted and watched, precisely because the casual bottle in the bathroom cabinet turned out to be one of the quietest dangers in the American home. But that reckoning belongs to the future, and the future, once again, is a thing you take a pill to avoid thinking about. Mr. Alvarado at the pharmacy hands the refill across the counter with a friendly word about the weather, drops it in a little white sack, and does not count anything or ask anything or flag anything, because nothing in his training tells him to. He has sold these capsules for years. He sleeps badly himself and takes the same ones. The transaction is as routine as buying stamps, and twice as comforting. You take your seconal with a small glass of water at the edge of the bed, the house dark, the children down, the day's amphetamine long since burned off, and the night's barbiturate just beginning its work. The capsule does what it promises. The thoughts go soft, the room goes distant, the long, bright and exhausting day folds itself up and is gone. You sleep deeply, chemically, completely, the way the whole street sleeps, trusting the little red capsule the way you trust the lock on the door, certain it is keeping something out rather than letting something in. Your wife has been low for months, weepy and difficult and not herself, and the doctor has a suggestion. You can sign her in. One signature, yours, is enough to admit her to the state hospital, where the treatments on offer include a procedure performed through the eye socket with a thin steel instrument. You are not asked to prove anything. She is not asked very much at all. The form sits on the doctor's desk with a pen beside it, and the decision the era hands you is entirely yours to make. The procedure has a name, the transorbital lobotomy, and a celebrity practitioner, a showman doctor named Walter Freeman, who has made it his life's work. Freeman performed his first one in 1946 on a housewife, and he has toured the country ever since, demonstrating the technique to admiring rooms, a technique that lifts the eyelid, sets a thin steel instrument very much like an ice pick against the top of the eye socket, and taps it through the bone to reach the brain behind. He can do it in minutes. He is proud of how fast he can do it. The patients are, overwhelmingly, women. Roughly 4 out of 5 of the early American lobotomies are performed on women, on wives and daughters the charts describe as agitated, difficult, emotional, unmanageable, the soft vocabulary of an era that has many words for an inconvenient woman and few for an unhappy one. The operation does not cure them, it quiets them, which is treated, by everyone but the woman, as the same thing. She comes back calmer, flatter and easier, a person reduced to a manageable size, and the family calls this a success because the noise has stopped. And the door to all of it is your signature. You do not have to prove she is ill. There is no hearing, no second opinion required, no advocate appointed to ask what she wants, because what she wants is not, legally, the question. A husband's name on a form is enough to commit a wife to the state hospital, And once she is inside, the treatments are decided by the institution, not by her. The system runs on the quiet assumption that a man knows what is best for the woman in his care, and the law has built no break for the moments when he does not. Picture proposing this today. Picture committing your spouse on your signature alone. Picture a doctor reaching for an ice pick to treat sadness. The modern words for it are battery, false imprisonment, malpractice, assault, a whole stack of crimes where the era saw only treatment. Consent, informed and documented and freely given, is now the entire foundation of medicine. Here it is an afterthought, if it is a thought at all. Most of the women are not lobotomized, to be clear. Most are simply committed, filed away in a state institution for a while or for good, on the same easy signature. The lobotomy is the sharp end of a much broader power. The power to declare a woman too much and have her quietly removed from the story, and that power sits in the hand that holds the pen on the doctor's desk. The doctor slides the form toward you, professional and kind. A man who genuinely believes he is helping, because by the standards he was trained in, he is. He has seen Freeman work. He speaks of the procedure the way one speaks of a tonsillectomy, a small fix for a clear problem. Your wife sits in the chair beside you, quiet now, watching the conversation happen across her, and the room treats this as normal, because it is. You hold the pen. Whatever you decide, the law will support, and whatever she wants is not on the form. There is a line for your signature and no line for hers, and that single missing line is the whole century pressing down on one quiet room. You learn, the way women learn these things, that there is one act against you the law does not recognize as possible when the man involved is your husband. The marriage itself is treated as a standing, permanent yes. There is no form to fill out, no officer who will take the report, no statute under which the word even fits. It is not that the law forgives it. The law has decided, in advance and on paper, that the thing simply cannot occur between a husband and a wife, and so for you it does not exist. The doctrine is old, older than the country, imported from English common law along with the powdered wigs and the property rules. A judge named Matthew Hale wrote it down in the 17th century, the idea that by marrying, a woman gave a consent she could never afterward withdraw, a contract with no exit clause, signed once and binding forever. The men who built American law copied it over without much examination, and so it sits in the statutes of every state, the marital exemption, the small, quiet, and immovable legal phrase that makes one particular crime impossible to commit against your own wife. It works not by forgiving the act, but by defining it out of existence. The law does not say the husband will be excused. The law says, more completely than that the thing is not a crime at all when these two people are married, the way it is not a crime to walk into your own house. The marriage is treated as a permission granted at the altar and revoked by nothing short of divorce, and inside that permission the word the rest of the world would use simply does not apply, so there is no report to file. Should you go to the police, the desk sergeant will hear you out, perhaps kindly, and then slide the form gently back across the counter, because there is no box on it for what you are describing, no statute to cite, no charge to bring. You have come to report a crime that, on paper, did not occur. He is not being cruel, he is being accurate. The law has tied his hands well in advance of your arrival. The change, when it comes late and slowly. No state will outlaw this until 1974, and it will not be a crime everywhere until 1993, which means a woman your age may be most of the way through her life before the law admits the thing she always knew. The exemption does not fall in one dramatic ruling. It is pried loose state by state against steady objection from people who insist that to remove it would somehow damage the institution of marriage itself. Explain the old rule to a young person today and they will assume you have it wrong, because the modern foundation of the law is consent, plainly and continuously, with marriage no exception to it whatsoever. The very idea that a wedding ring could erase a person's nose strikes the modern ear as not merely unjust but bizarre. A relic, a thing that surely cannot have been the actual law. It was the actual law. It was the law in all 48 states the year you are living through. You learn the rule the way most women learn it, not from a book but from the silence around it, from the absence of any door to knock on. There is no pamphlet, no number to call, only the quiet, general understanding that this particular harm has been placed by the law outside the reach of the law, and that you are expected to absorb it the way you absorb the weather. The marriage looks, from the street, like every other marriage on the block, trimmed hedge and clean curtains and a car in the drive. The law is satisfied, the institution is preserved, and the one person with standing to object has been told, in advance and on paper, that she has none. You sit in the doctor's office and ask the careful question, and the doctor gives you a careful look. He cannot help you, not here, not legally. In this state it is a crime to use a device to prevent a child, and a crime for him to so much as counsel you toward one. The statute reaches past the pharmacy shelf and into the conversation itself. He can tell you to abstain, which is legal, and he can wish you luck, which is free, but the diaphragm stays in the drawer he is not allowed to open. The law that ties his hands has a name and a villain. It is called a Comstock law, after Anthony Comstock, a 19th century crusader who decided that contraception was obscene and got the federal government and most of the states to agree in writing. The statutes he inspired make it a crime to sell, mail, advertise, or even describe a method of preventing pregnancy. And in a handful of states, Connecticut chief among them, the law goes furthest of all and bans the use of contraception itself by anyone, married or not. Read that twice, because it is easy to skim past. It is not merely illegal to buy the device, it is illegal to use it, in your own bedroom, as a married couple, with the door shut. The state has written itself a seat in the most private room in the house, and declared that what happens there is its business to police. The diaphragm in the doctor's drawer is, in the eyes of Connecticut, contraband, and the doctor who fits it is, in the eyes of Connecticut, an accomplice. So, doctor. Whitcomb gives you the careful look doctors in this state have perfected, and he chooses his words like a man crossing a frozen pond. He can discuss your health in general terms. He can suggest, vaguely, that another pregnancy so soon might be hard on you. What he cannot do, what the statute forbids him to do, is the one useful thing, the practical instruction, the device, the actual help, which would put his license and his liberty on the wrong side of a law that means it. The result is a strange theatre of hints. Women learn to ask sideways questions and doctors learn to give sideways answers. A whole grammar of careful, coded and roundabout euphemism built up around a subject nobody is allowed to name. The information exists. It simply has to be smuggled, passed between women in lowered voices, learned from a bolder friend or a sympathetic nurse who will say at the door what the doctor could not say at the desk. Imagine the state in your bedroom today and the modern mind recoils, because the right of a married couple to decide this for themselves now feels as basic as breathing. That right is not old. It arrives in 1965, when the Supreme Court strikes the Connecticut law down in a case called Griswold, and discovers, in the process, a constitutional right to privacy the country had somehow done without. Until that ruling lands, the drawer stays shut, and the law stays in the bedroom. Missus. Goff, the nurse, walks you out, and at the door, away from the desk and the chart and the official record, she pauses, lays a hand on your arm, and tells you quietly the name of a doctor one state over who is known to be helpful, the kind of thing she would never say 6 feet back in the examining room. It is a small act of conspiracy, performed in a doorway, and it is the most useful sentence spoken in the entire appointment. You drive home with a name and a county and a careful plan, the way women in this state plan everything about their own bodies, around the law rather than with it. The state of Connecticut, satisfied that obscenity has been kept from your marriage, goes on policing a bedroom it has never seen, certain the closed drawer is a victory for decency rather than a small daily defeat for the people it claims to serve. You want a cup of coffee and a place to sit, and the counter in front of you settles the matter before you open your mouth. There is a sign bolted to the wall above the pie case, and the sign tells you which stools are yours and which are not. This is not the personal preference of the man at the register. It is the law of the state, written down and enforced, and stepping onto the wrong stool is not rudeness but a crime for which you can be arrested. You read the sign and you choose. The thing that does not survive into the modern imagination is that the sign is not anyone's opinion. The man behind the counter may be kind, he may be cruel. It does not matter, because the sign is the law, passed by the state legislature, printed in the statute books, enforced by the police, and the man at the register is merely its clerk. Segregation here is not a custom people happen to follow, it is a body of law people are required to follow, with penalties for those who do not. So the counter divides the world, There is a section where you may sit and a section where you may not, and the line between them is drawn by the state with the same authority it uses to set the speed limit. Step across it, settle onto the wrong stool, order a coffee in the wrong 6 feet of the same room, and you have not been impolite. You have broken the law, and you can be arrested for it, fined and jailed, for the crime of sitting down in the wrong place. The genius of the system, if genius is the word, is its total coverage. It is not only the lunch counter, it is the water fountain, the waiting room, the train car, the movie balcony, the public pool, the library, the hospital, the cemetery. The law has reached into every corner of daily life and drawn its line through all of them, so that a person spends every hour navigating a map of permitted and forbidden space, a map you carry in your head and never, ever misread. Picture the modern version, because there is no modern version, because every gear of this machine is now itself illegal. The signs that were once the law are now evidence in a civil rights case. The act that was once your crime is now the owner's crime. The wrong reversed in the eyes of the law so completely that bolting that sign to the wall today is the thing that brings the federal government to the door. The whole moral polarity of the statute has been flipped, which is the law's quiet way of admitting it had it backward. But that flip is years away, fought for at exactly these counters by people who will sit down at the wrong stool on purpose and refuse to move, and pay for it with the arrest the law promises. For now, the sign holds. The waitress, a woman named Arlene, will not serve you here, not because she has decided so, but because the law has, and she sets her order pad down on the far end of the counter and looks past you with the practiced blankness of a person doing what she is told. You read the sign, because you have read 10,000 signs exactly like it, in every town and every store. A lifetime of reading the wall before you choose where to put your body. The reading is automatic now, a reflex worn smooth by repetition, the constant low calculus of where you are allowed to be. So you make the choice the law leaves you, which is no choice, while the coffee steams on the wrong side of an invisible line the state has made as real as a wall. The sign keeps its post above the pie case, bolted, legal, and certain, doing the work the whole state has assigned it, which is to make sure that a cup of coffee is never, for some people, just a cup of coffee. You have decided to marry the person you love, and the person you love is the wrong colour for the county clerk's comfort and the state's penal code. There is no license available to you here. Cross the wrong line and the marriage is not merely void, it is a felony, punishable in Virginia by 1 to 5 years in the penitentiary for each of you. So you plan a drive to a city where the paperwork is possible, knowing the marriage that is legal there becomes a crime the moment you carry it back home. The law has a clinical name, an anti-miscegenation statute, and there are versions of it on the books in 24 states the year you are trying to marry. Some forbid only certain pairings, some forbid many, but they share one confident assumption that the state has both the right and the duty to decide which two people may stand up together and say, "I do." In Virginia, the statute is called, with no irony whatsoever, the Racial Integrity Act, and it does not merely refuse you a license, it makes the marriage a crime. Read the penalty and feel the temperature drop. In Virginia, marrying across the colour line is a felony, punishable by 1 to 5 years in the state penitentiary. For each of you, not a fine, not an annulment, no plus, 10, prison, the same prison used for theft and assault, applied to the act of marrying the person you love. The state has looked at a wedding and decided it is a crime scene, and it stands ready to separate a husband and a wife by putting them in cells. So couples do what couples have always done when the local authority forbids the thing, which is travel. You drive to Washington, where the paperwork is possible, and you marry there, legally and properly, with a real license and a real ceremony, and then you make the mistake of coming home, because the marriage that was legal in the district becomes, the moment you cross back into Virginia, a felony you are now committing simply by living together under your own roof. This is not a hypothetical. A few years from your kitchen, a couple named Richard and Mildred Loving will do exactly this, marry in Washington and come home to Virginia, and the county sheriff will walk into their bedroom in the middle of the night, flashlight in hand, to find them in bed together and arrest them for it. Their crime is the marriage certificate hanging on the wall. They will be told to leave the state for 25 years or go to prison, and they will spend years fighting that order all the way up. In 1967 they win, and the Supreme Court strikes down every remaining law of this kind in a single ruling, in a case that carries, by pure poetic accident, the surname Loving. 16 states still have these statutes on that day, 16 states still treating a marriage as a crime, and all 16 fall at once. After that, the whole machinery is gone, and within a generation the idea that the government ever claimed this power will seem almost impossible to believe. But you are not in 1967. You are here, now, with a person you love and a county clerk who will not issue the license. The clerk, a tidy man named Mr. Boyd in a green eyeshade, pushes the application back across the counter without filling it in, polite, patient, and immovable, doing his small part to enforce a law he did not write and has never once questioned. He wishes you a good day. He means it. He has just helped the state forbid your marriage and feels nothing but that he has done his job. So you plan the drive and count the miles to a friendly estate and carry your wedding back across the line like contraband, a marriage that is a celebration in one place and a crime in another, the same two people transformed into an offence by nothing more than which side of a state border they happen to fall asleep on. You pay your fare at the front of the bus, and then, if the driver requires it, you step back off and walk to the rear door to board again, because the front is not for you. The seats are divided by law into two sections, and yours is the back one. If the white section fills, you give up your seat and stand, because a white passenger is never expected to. The ordinance is printed and the driver enforces it, and refusing your assigned place is grounds for arrest and a fine. The bus is a small rolling republic with its own constitution, and the constitution is segregation. By city ordinance, the seats split into two zones, white toward the front, coloured toward the back, and a movable line between them that the driver alone controls. He is not just driving the bus. He is a sworn officer of the seating chart, empowered by law to order you up, move you back, and have you arrested if you decline. The cruelty is in the details, and the details are precise. If the white section fills and another white passenger boards, the driver can order an entire row of coloured passengers to stand so the one white rider may sit, because the rule is not merely that the races are separated, but that a white passenger must never have to stand while a coloured passenger sits. You can be seated, legally and properly, in your assigned zone, and still be commanded to rise and give that seat away, and refusing is not stubbornness, it is a crime. So you ride standing over an empty seat you are forbidden to take, swaying in the aisle of a half-empty bus. The law having decided the indignity is the point. You hold the rail. You watch the town go by through the window. You do the arithmetic everyone on your side of the line does constantly. Where to sit, when to move, how to read the driver's mood. A full-time job of navigation the white passengers in front never know they are exempt from. Right now, in Montgomery, this exact system is running, and a white passenger never has to stand. But the whole arrangement is about to fail spectacularly, because a seamstress named Rosa Parks is going to be asked to give up her seat and is going to say no, and that single quiet no is going to put a great many people on their feet and off the buses for over a year. The boycott is coming. The ordinance does not know it yet. The driver swinging his line forward this afternoon has no idea he is enforcing a rule with a fuse on it. Try to imagine a driver today ordering you to surrender your seat by race, and you cannot, because the modern bus is one of the few genuinely neutral spaces left. First come, first served, the most basic fairness there is. That neutrality was not granted, it was won, at exactly these fare boxes, by people who got arrested for sitting down, and the law that now protects every rider equally was written specifically to kill the law you are living under. The driver, a heavy-set man named Mr. Blake, glances at you in the long mirror and jerks his thumb toward the back without a word, the universal gesture of a man exercising authority he did not earn and does not question. You move, because the alternative is the police, and the police will side with the thumb. You find your place among the standing in the rear, over the wheel well, where the ride is roughest, which is also, you have long since noticed, exactly where the law has decided you belong. The bus rolls on through the segregated town, and the empty seat up front stays empty, kept that way by law, a small monument to the whole arrangement, reserved for no one, forbidden to you, rolling along as solid, certain, and permanent as anything else the state has bolted into place. You go down to the courthouse to register to vote, which is your right, and the registrar hands you a test, which is the point. You must read and interpret a clause of the state constitution to his private satisfaction, recite obscure facts, and perhaps pay a tax for the privilege of trying. Your white neighbour was waved through with a signature. The questions you receive have no passing answer, because the test was built to produce a result, not to measure one. You take the pen anyway and begin. The right to vote is yours on paper, guaranteed by amendments to the Constitution itself, and the state knows it cannot simply tell you no. So it does something cleverer. It builds a gate in front of the ballot box and hands the key to a single man, the county registrar, and lets him decide, case by case, face by face, who may walk through. The gate is called a literacy test, and it is not a test of literacy. It is a test of who you are, administered by a man who already knows the answer he wants. He hands you the form. You may be asked to read a passage of the state constitution and then explain it to his satisfaction, and the phrase "to his satisfaction" is the whole trick, because satisfaction is his to grant or withhold, and he is not required to explain himself. You may be asked how many bubbles are in a bar of soap, how many jelly beans fill a jar, the name of a county judge 3 counties over. There is no answer that passes, because passing was never on the menu. The test is a machine for producing a no while wearing the face of a fair question. Meanwhile, your white neighbour, who may be barely able to read, signs his name and is waved through, because the test was never for him. Some states even build him a side door, a grandfather clause exempting anyone whose grandfather could vote, which neatly includes every white man and excludes you by arithmetic done before you were born. And if by some miracle you pass the test, the poll tax is still waiting, a fee for the privilege of voting, set just high enough to price out the people the test somehow missed. The Justice Department arrives the moment any of this surfaces today, because every device in this paragraph is now explicitly federally illegal. The literacy test, the poll tax, the registrar's unreviewable whim, all of it was swept away by the Voting Rights Act of 1965, a law written in direct response to exactly the courthouse you are standing in. The modern voter shows up and votes, and the idea that a clerk could simply decide they had failed a pop quiz about soap bubbles sounds like something from a far older and stranger country. It was this one. Mr. Tatum, a slow-speaking man with a toothpick riding his lip, takes your completed form, holds it up to the window light as though grading it, and informs you that you did not pass. He does not say why. He is not obligated to. He drops the form into a drawer, the same drawer that has swallowed 1,000 forms exactly like it, and tells you that you are welcome to try again, knowing the next form will fail too, and the one after that, for as long as he sits in this chair. You came down to the courthouse in your good clothes, with your answers ready, having studied a constitution you are not allowed to help write, and you leave the way nearly everyone who looks like you leaves, turned back at the gate by a man whose whole job is to keep it shut while insisting it is open. The rejection is quiet. There is no scene. There is only the drawer and the next person in line, and the long, patient and deliberate cruelty of a system that says yes to your right and no to your vote in the same breath, perfectly legal, perfectly deniable, doing the one thing it was ever built to do. You have saved for a house, and the bank turns you down, and the reason is a map you are never shown. On that map your neighbourhood is outlined in red, marked hazardous for lending, not because of anything you have done, but because of who lives there. The federal guidelines endorse the line, no loan officer needs to say a cruel word. The policy does the work quietly, in coloured ink, in a back office. You are told only that the application was declined, and not that the answer was settled years before you asked. Redlining is the quiet cousin of the lunch counter sign, the discrimination that never has to say a word out loud. It works through a map. Government appraisers, working for a federal agency, went through the city's neighbourhood by neighbourhood and graded each one for lending risk, colouring the best areas green and the worst areas red. And the single fastest way to get your neighbourhood coloured red was to have black families living in it. The colour was the verdict. The verdict was permanent, and it was endorsed, drawn and filed by the government itself. So when you walk into the bank with your savings and your steady job and your sensible plan to buy a house, the answer has, in a real sense, already been given, years ago, in an office you have never seen, by a man with a box of coloured pencils. The loan officer does not need to be a bigot. He may be perfectly pleasant. He simply consults the map, finds your street inside the red line, and declines the loan with genuine regret and no further explanation, because the map has done the refusing for him and left him only the paperwork. The poisonous genius of it is the deniability. Nobody put up a sign. Nobody said the forbidden thing. A man was simply turned down for a loan, which happens, and the reason lives in a filing cabinet he will never be shown, written in a colour rather than a sentence. The discrimination has been laundered through a bureaucracy until it looks like ordinary banking, a neutral business decision about risk, when the risk it measures is, at bottom, the presence of people like you. And the effect compounds, year over year, like interest in reverse. The house you cannot buy is the wealth you cannot build, is the inheritance you cannot leave, and the neighbourhood starved of loans cannot maintain itself, which the map then points to as proof that the red was deserved all along. The line drew the decline, and the decline justified the line, a perfect closed circle, humming away for decades while everyone involved insists no one did anything wrong. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 will eventually make exactly this a federal offence, naming it, banning it, and handing people the right to sue over it. The modern bank that steers loans by the colour of a neighbourhood is breaking a law written in direct response to the coloured pencils, and it knows it. But the act is years away, and the map is current, and the line around your street is as fresh and binding as the day someone drew it. Mr. Easterbrook, the loan officer, is sorry, and you can see that he is sorry, which somehow makes it worse. A kind man delivering an unkind verdict he has decided is simply the weather. He squares your application into a neat stack, caps his fountain pen and squares it to the blotter, and eases the papers back with a sympathetic word about trying again when things are different, knowing they will not be different, because the thing that needs to change is not your savings or your job, but a line on a map in a drawer downtown. You gather your papers and walk back out past the marble and the brass. Your money still good, your plan still sound, your street still red. The map stays in the drawer, the line holds, and the house you wanted goes to someone whose grandfather, by pure coincidence, lived on the right colour. You came home from the war with a body that no longer matches the one you left with, and the city has an opinion about where you may take it. There is an ordinance, plainly worded, that makes it unlawful for any person deemed diseased, maimed, or unsightly to appear in the public streets. The penalty is a fine. The sidewalk in front of your own house is, by the letter of the law, a place you are not permitted to be seen. You weigh whether today is a day worth the risk of being noticed. The ordinance is real, and it is written with a bluntness the modern eye reads as a hoax. It declares that any person who is diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object shall not expose himself to public view, and it sets a fine for each offence. The newspapers looking back will call these the ugly laws, but the cities that pass them do not think of them as cruel. They think of them as tidy, a municipal housekeeping measure, the removal of an unpleasant sight the way you would remove litter. So the city has, in effect, made your face a misdemeanour. Not anything you have done, not any harm you have caused, simply the fact of your body in the shared air, the wound the war gave you or the illness left behind, all of it reclassified by ordinance as a public nuisance. You are not accused of begging or loitering or any act at all. You are accused, in the plain language of the statute, of being an unsightly object, which is to say you are accused of being seen. The cities that have these on the books are not obscure. Chicago has one, Columbus, Cleveland, Omaha, Portland, a long respectable list of American cities, all using nearly identical language, as if the cruelty came from a shared template, which it did. And the laws are not antique curiosities gathering dust. They are live, enforceable, and enforced, and Chicago will not repeal its version until 1974. The logic underneath it, when anyone bothers to state it, is a tangle of bad science and worse manners, the half-belief that the sight of disability could upset the healthy, mixed with the simpler wish that the comfortable not be made uncomfortable. The disabled veteran, the polio survivor, the person the factory machine caught, all are asked by law to stay out of view, to keep to the back rooms and the side streets, so the public space can keep its pleasant, unbroken surface. Set this statute beside the modern law, and it is not merely unthinkable but precisely inverted, because the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 takes the exact opposite position, that public space must be open to everybody, ramped and widened and rebuilt to include the very people the ugly laws shoved out of sight. The modern city is legally required to let you in. This city is legally permitted to keep you out. The same sidewalk, the law pointing in opposite directions. Officer Mulvaney, walking his beat, sees you on the corner and gives you the look, the one that is not quite a command but carries the ordinance behind it, a small jerk of the chin that means move along before this becomes official. He is not a monster. He would rather not write the ticket. But the law is the law, and the law has decided you are a thing the street is better off without, and his job is to keep the street the way the city wants it. So you weigh it, the way you weigh it, every time you leave the house, whether today is a day with the strength for the looks and the chins and the ordnance humming behind them. You wanted only to sit in the sun on a public bench in a public square, the most ordinary thing a person can want, and you decide, as you so often decide, that the bench is not worth the fine, and you turn and you go back the way you came. You have a federal job, a good one, and one morning the questions begin. There are investigators now, and a program, and a growing list of people quietly removed from their desks for reasons never printed but always understood. The act you are suspected of is a crime in every state, and the suspicion alone is enough. You learn to guard your sentences, to keep your evenings vague, to build a life with the lights low, because the same government that signs your paycheck has decided that who you love is a risk it means to eliminate. The campaign has a name, the Lavender Scare, the quieter twin of the Red Scare running alongside it, and its premise is that a person like you is a danger to the nation, not because of anything you have done at your desk, where your work is excellent, but because of who you are after hours, which the government has decided makes you a security risk, a person who could be blackmailed, a weak point in the machine. The logic is circular and airtight. You are open to blackmail because the thing about you is shameful, secret, and dangerous, and it is shameful and secret because the government insists on treating it as a crime. And it is a crime in every state, written into the law as sodomy, a charge that covers your private life entirely and carries real penalties, arrest, prison, a name in the paper that ends a career and sometimes a life. So you are caught in a perfect trap. The government calls you a security risk for being open to exposure, and then the government is itself the one threatening to expose you, the danger and the source of the danger wearing the same suit and signing the same paycheck. In 1953, the president signs an executive order making this official, listing the era's clinical term as grounds to deny or revoke federal employment. Thousands lose their jobs, quietly, with no trial and no appeal, called into a small room and asked the questions and shown the door. There are programs now, in the parks and elsewhere, dedicated to the arrests, hundreds rounded up, the whole apparatus turned toward people whose only offence is the private shape of their love. So you learn the survival skills the era demands, which are all skills of concealment. You keep two lives, the public one immaculate and the private one in shadow, and you guard the seam between them with everything you have. You speak carefully. You bring an acceptable date to the office party. You build your real life in the few places that will hold it, behind drawn curtains and unlisted doors, always listening for the knock, because the knock is real and it has come for people you know. Try to fire a person for this today and you are the one breaking the law, because the Supreme Court has since ruled that the Constitution protects exactly the private life the era criminalized, and that firing a worker for it is illegal discrimination. The polarity is flipped again, the crime becoming the protected right, and the persecution becoming the offence. But that ruling is a long way off, and the executive order is current, and the investigator assigned to your department is working his way down a list. His name is Mr. Heath, and he is polite, almost gentle, which is the worst part, a soft-spoken man who sits across the desk and asks his careful questions, and watches your face for the flicker that will tell him he has found what he came for. He folds his hands, he waits. He has done this many times, and he is patient. So you hold very still. You give the flat answers, the safe ones, and you keep your face a closed door, and you survive the interview the way you survive everything in this decade, by revealing nothing, and you go home to the life the government has decided is a crime, draw the curtains, and live it quietly, fully, illegally, in the only hours and the only rooms the era will let you have it. Your son comes home and reports, without much drama, that the teacher used the paddle today. There is a paddle. It hangs near the chalkboard or waits in a drawer, and the teacher is fully within her rights to swing it at a child who talks back, fidgets, or fails to grasp long division. You are not alarmed, because you were paddled too, and so was everyone you know. The school carries the authority of a small government, and corporal punishment is simply one of the tools that government is permitted to use. The paddle is not contraband smuggled into the classroom by a cruel teacher. The paddle is standard equipment, as ordinary as the chalk and the globe, and in many schools it has a name, a personality, sometimes holes drilled through it to cut wind resistance, a detail somebody actually sat down and thought about. The teacher's authority to use it is not in question, because the school stands in the place of the parent, a legal doctrine with a Latin name, and the parent, this year, hits. So the school hits too, with the full backing of the law and the warm approval of most of the parents. The offences that earn the paddle are not limited to genuine misbehaviour. A child can be paddled for talking in line, for a wrong answer delivered with too much confidence, for chewing gum, for left-handedness in the stricter rooms, for the broad, ungovernable crime of being a child in a building that prizes silence. The punishment is public, administered at the front of the room or in the hall, the sound of it carrying, which is the point, because the paddle disciplines the watchers as much as the struck. Your son reports it without much drama because it is not, to him, dramatic. It is weather. Everyone gets it eventually, the good students and the bad, and a boy who went a whole year without the paddle would be regarded as either a saint or suspiciously sly. You are not alarmed by the news because you cannot be, having been paddled yourself, by teachers you remember fondly, in a childhood you consider to have turned out fine. The cycle validates itself. It hurt us, and we are okay. Therefore it does not really hurt, a syllogism with a missing middle that nobody examines. The variables have shifted hard since then. In much of the modern country, a teacher who swings a paddle at a child has committed assault, and the parents who once nodded along now arrive with lawyers, and corporal punishment in schools has been banned across a long list of states precisely because the thing everyone once accepted came to look, on reflection, like an adult striking a child for the crime of being small. The legal ground that held the paddle up has simply dissolved. Miss Pruitt, your son's teacher, keeps her paddle on two little hooks beside the blackboard, in plain sight, the way you might display a useful tool, and she takes it down with a businesslike calm the children have learned to read across the room, a calm that means the lesson is briefly going to change shape. She does not relish it. She does not avoid it. It is, to her, simply part of teaching, one of the instruments of the job, hung on the wall between the map and the alphabet for everyone to see. The paddle hangs on the wall. The principal has a bigger one. The punishment is announced, performed, and recorded with the bland efficiency of any other school routine. Slotted between arithmetic and lunch. So your son tells you about the paddle the way he tells you about the spelling test, a thing that happened at school, neither here nor there, and you nod and ask what he did to earn it and remind him to behave, closing the loop the era built and passing the rule along intact. Tomorrow the paddle comes down again, for some other small offender, in front of the whole quiet watching room, perfectly legal, perfectly normal. You have your own income and your own plans, and you walk into the bank to open a line of credit in your own name. The banker is polite and entirely immovable. You will need your husband to sign or your father if there is no husband, because a woman's application requires a man's name beside it to be considered at all. Your salary, the banker explains, will be discounted on the assumption you will soon leave work to have children. You brought a pen. The bank would prefer a different hand to hold it. The bank is not breaking any rule by turning you away. It is following the ordinary practice of the entire industry, which has decided, with quiet unanimity, that a woman is not a reliable borrower on her own. Not because of your numbers, which are fine, your salary steady and your savings real, but because of a single assumption that overrides every number on the page, that you are a temporary worker who will marry or has married and will therefore soon stop earning to have children, carrying the bank's collateral off with you into the nursery. So the bank wants a man, a husband to sign, or a father if there is no husband, a male name beside yours to make the application real, the way a contract needs a notary. The man does not need to earn the money. He does not need to manage the account. He needs only to exist and to sign. His signature functioning as a kind of support beam under a building the bank does not believe you can hold up alone. You are, on the form, a dependent clause in search of a sentence. And it goes further than a cosigner. A married woman's own income is routinely discounted in the bank's math, counted at half or not at all, on the theory that a womb is a liability and a fertile woman a poor risk. You can be the higher earner in your marriage and still be treated, by the loan officer, as the lesser financial person, your paycheck quietly marked down because of what your body might one day do. The math is insulting, arbitrary, and entirely legal. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974 will make this a federal violation, outlawing any denial of credit on the basis of sex or marital status. The law written precisely because of mornings like this one in banks like this one. The modern woman applies, qualifies on her numbers, and gets the card or the loan or the mortgage in her own name. And the idea that she would need her husband's permission to borrow her own money sounds, to her, like a story about another planet. It was this one, 20 years out. Mr. Caldwell, the banker, is courteous about the whole thing, which makes it harder rather than easier. A pleasant man explaining a closed door as though it were the weather. There is a framed photograph of his own wife on the desk, angled to face the customers. He squares your paperwork, recaps his pen with a small click, and edges the forms back across the polished desk with the suggestion that you bring your husband in, as though the missing ingredient were a forgotten signature and not your entire standing as a person. He means no harm. He is simply the bank, and the bank has rules, and the rules do not include you. You brought your own pen, your own numbers, your own plan, every part of the transaction except the one part the era requires, which is a man. The money is yours, the job is yours, the savings are yours. But the standing to borrow against any of it belongs, by the unwritten rule of every bank in town, to a signature you do not own and cannot supply on your own behalf. So you gather the forms the banker would not process and go home to ask a man to vouch for the woman who has been paying the bills all along. You are expecting, and the moment it begins to show, the arithmetic at the office changes. You go to tell your supervisor, half hoping for congratulations, and instead you are quietly informed of your last day. No law protects the job. An employer may let a pregnant woman go for the simple fact of the pregnancy, and most do, because a visibly expecting woman at a desk is considered unseemly and temporary by definition. You clean out your drawer. There is no form to file and no office to call, because nothing illegal has occurred. The rule is not written down anywhere, which is part of how it works. There is no statute that says a pregnant woman must be fired. There is simply nothing that says she cannot be, and into that silence the custom rushes, universal and unquestioned, that a woman who is visibly expecting does not belong at a desk. The pregnancy is treated as a resignation she did not know she was submitting, effective the moment it begins to show. So you go in to share the happy news, and you watch the supervisor's face do the small private sum, the calculation that has nothing to do with your work, which is excellent, and everything to do with the swelling fact of you. He congratulates you because he is not a brute, and then in nearly the same breath he begins to talk about your transition, your last weeks, the temporary girl who will cover your desk, and you realize the conversation you came to start is one he is already finishing. The reasons, when any are given, are a soft tangle of propriety and assumption. A pregnant woman at the front desk is unseemly, a visible reminder of the biology the office prefers to keep off stage. A mother will not really want to work, the thinking goes, and will be unreliable, and will leave soon anyway, so the firing merely hurries along a departure everyone assumes is coming. None of this is your stated plan. Your plan was to keep your job, but your plan is not the document the office is reading. Try this today, and the company has broken the law, because the Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978 made it illegal to fire or demote a woman for being pregnant, treating it for what it is, a form of sex discrimination. As late as 1976, the Supreme Court itself ruled the other way, that excluding pregnancy from benefits was not discrimination at all, which tells you how settled the custom was. The modern worker announces a pregnancy and keeps her job, and the notion of being walked to the door for it reads as a relic. It was the rule the year you are living through. Mr. Sefton, your supervisor, is decent, gracious, and unbothered about it in the way that costs him nothing, shaking your hand and wishing you and the baby well even as he relieves you of the work you came in to keep. He slides your final paperwork across the desk already prepared, which tells you the decision preceded your announcement, that he had the form ready the moment the rumour reached him. He does not see himself as firing you. He sees himself as acknowledging a fact of nature, gently, with a handshake. So you clean out your drawer that afternoon, the pencils and the spare stockings, and the photograph of the husband whose name, not so coincidentally, is the one the bank wanted last week, and you carry the small box out past the desks of women who are watching and doing their own quiet math about their own futures. There is no form to file, no office to call, no wrong to report, because in the eyes of the law and the office and the era, nothing wrong has happened. A woman got pregnant and stopped working. The two events are treated as one, joined by a custom so total it does not even need a statute to enforce it. You open the newspaper to look for work, and the listings have already decided half the question for you. The page is split into two columns, help wanted male and help wanted female, and the interesting jobs, the ones that pay and promote, are filed under the column that is not yours. The arrangement is legal and ordinary and printed in the same paper that carries the funnies. You run your finger down the female column, past the typing and the nursing, and you build your ambitions out of whatever the column permits. The newspaper has done your sorting before you ever pick up a pen. The classified section is split down the middle into two headings, not as a suggestion but as the structure of the page itself, and the jobs do not merely cluster by custom under each, they are filed there on purpose, the good ones on one side and the lesser ones on the other. You are allowed to read both columns. You are allowed to apply to only one. Run your finger down the female column and survey the kingdom. There is typing, there is filing, there is nursing and teaching and telephone operating and the selling of cosmetics, honourable, respectable and useful work, all of it capped, the ceiling built into the listing itself. No path from any of these to the corner office, because the corner office is advertised in the other column, the one with your name crossed off at the top. The manager job, the trainee track, the position that promotes, all sit a few inches to the left under male, as close as the next column and as far as the moon. The division is not subtle and it is not illegal. Employers place the ads this way openly, and the paper prints them this way without a blink, because everyone agrees that some jobs are men's jobs and some are women's, and the listing simply reflects the natural order the way a thermometer reflects the weather. Should you call about a posting in the wrong column, the voice on the other end will explain, kindly or not, that they are looking for a man, and that will be the end of it. No further reason required. Try printing these headings today and you have violated the Civil Rights Act, because sorting job ads by sex became illegal, and the modern listing describes the work and invites anyone who can do it. The columns collapsed into one. The young woman now reads a single list and applies to whatever she is qualified for, and the idea that the newspaper once told her, in bold type, which half of the economy was off limits, sounds invented. It was set in type every single morning, between the comics and the obituaries. You call about a posting that interests you, a real job with a future, and Mr. Ostrander on the other end is perfectly friendly right up until he registers your voice, at which point he clarifies, with the ease of a man stating the obvious, that the position is for a man, and asks, helpfully, whether you can type, because there might be something in the pool. You thank him. You hang up. You did nothing wrong, and neither, by the rules of the day, did he. So you go back to the female column and build your ambitions out of what it offers, trimming the shape of your future to fit the size of the listing, the way the women before you trimmed theirs, the way the paper assumes you will. The want ads are not cruel about it. They are merely certain, printed fresh each day in two tidy columns, one wide with possibility and one narrow with permission, and your whole working life is expected to fit inside the narrow one without complaint. The argument next door has turned loud again, and then loud in a way that is not only voices, and you stand in your kitchen deciding whether to call anyone. You know how the call will go. An officer may come, may stand on the porch, may suggest everyone settle down, and will then leave, because what happens between a husband and a wife inside their own home is treated as a private family matter and not a crime. There is no arrest to make in the eyes of the law. There is only a closed door. The phrase the era uses is a domestic, and the word does a lot of quiet work. It takes a thing that would be a crime anywhere else, an assault, plain and chargeable if it happened between strangers on the street, and reclassifies it the instant it happens inside a marriage, downgrading it from a matter for the law to a matter for the family. The same blow as a crime on the sidewalk and a private disagreement in the kitchen, and the only variable that changed is the address. So the police, when they come at all, come reluctantly, trained by custom to see the callers beneath them, a marital squabble rather than a real case. The standard response is not an arrest, but a cooling off, the officer suggesting that the man take a walk around the block, that everyone calm down, that this is between the two of you, and then leaving, the door swinging shut behind him on a situation he has declined to treat as the assault it would be in any other room. There is no protective order to issue, because the legal instrument does not exist yet. There is no shelter to drive her to, because the network of shelters has not been built. There is no policy compelling the officer to act, because that reform is decades away, born of exactly these failures. The woman who calls for help discovers that help, in any official sense, has not yet been invented for her situation, that the law has looked at her marriage and decided to wait outside. Today, the machinery turns the other way. The modern officer arriving at a domestic call operates under laws that often require an arrest when there is evidence of violence, that provide protective orders and shelters and a path the era could not imagine, all of it built specifically because the old way, the cooling off and the closed door, failed so many people so completely. The thing the era called private is now precisely the thing the law insists on entering. Officer Brennan stands on the porch with his hat in his hand, decent, uncomfortable, and plainly out of his depth. And he says the words the training gave him, that maybe everyone needs to settle down, that he does not want to have to come back, and he means the last part as a warning to the household rather than a promise to the woman inside. He is not indifferent. He simply has no tool for this. No charge his sergeant would respect. No box on any form. And so he does the only thing the era equips him to do, which is leave. You stand in your own kitchen, having watched the entire performance from the window, the porch, the hat, the cooling off, the cruiser pulling away, and you understand exactly what you have seen, which is the law declining to cross a threshold. You have seen it before, on other porches, on other evenings, the same short script performed by different officers, and you know it will be performed again. The marriage is a private country with its own borders, and the police have honoured them, and the door has closed, and whatever happens behind it now happens, as it has always happened, out of the law's careful sight. You are out of work and short of money, and you are standing on a corner with nowhere in particular to be, which is, it turns out, against the law. An officer can stop you for exactly this, for idleness, for loitering, for having no visible means of support, and the vagueness is the feature, not the flaw. He decides on the spot whether your standing there is a crime. You have committed no act, harmed no one, taken nothing. You have simply failed to look busy in a place where the law expects busyness. The vagrancy law is a marvel of deliberate vagueness, and the vagueness is not a flaw the legislature failed to fix, but the entire mechanism it was built to provide. The statute makes it a crime to be a vagrant, then defines a vagrant as a person who is idle, who loiters, who wanders with no lawful purpose, who has no visible means of support, a string of phrases that describe not an action but a condition, the condition of being poor and unoccupied in public. You can be arrested not for doing something but for being something, which is a very useful thing for a law to allow. Because it criminalizes a status rather than an act, the law hands the officer something close to unlimited discretion. He does not need to catch you stealing or fighting or breaking a window. He needs only to look at you, decide you fit the description, idle, shabby and unexplained, and the description is broad enough to fit almost anyone he chooses to fit it to. The vagrancy charge is the master key on the officer's belt, the one that opens any door, the catch-all he reaches for when he wants you gone but you have not actually done anything, and the people it opens onto are predictable. The out of work, the homeless, the drifter, the man whose only crime is having nowhere to be, but also, conveniently, whoever the officer dislikes the look of, the stranger in town, the person on the wrong street. The law does not require evidence of wrongdoing because it has defined wrongdoing as a way of standing on a corner, and a way of standing on a corner is something the officer can simply assert. The charge collapses in a modern courtroom because the Supreme Court struck these laws down in 1972 as unconstitutionally vague, ruling that a law a person cannot possibly obey in advance, a law that criminalizes ordinary harmless existence, is no law at all but an invitation to arbitrary arrest. The modern citizen has a right to stand on a public sidewalk doing nothing in particular, a right so basic it feels absurd to name, and yet it had to be won because for a very long time standing still in the wrong place was genuinely a crime. Officer Doyle crosses the street toward you with the unhurried confidence of a man who holds all the cards, and he asks the question that is really a verdict, where you are headed and whether you have any money on you, and your honest answers, nowhere and not much, are precisely the two answers the statute was written to punish. He does not need more. He has the law, and the law has decided that your nowhere and your not much are, between them, probable cause. So you give the answers that might get you moved along instead of booked, a destination invented on the spot, a job you are just about to start, the small fictions the poor learn to keep ready, because the truth, that you are simply out of work and out of doors, is the one thing the law explicitly forbids. You have harmed no one and taken nothing and broken nothing, and you stand there anyway on the edge of arrest, guilty of the only crime the statute really names, which is the crime of being visibly down on your luck in a public place. You flip to the back of a magazine, find the advertisement for a rifle, and fill out the little coupon with whatever name suits you that afternoon. You enclose the money, mail it off, and in a few weeks a firearm arrives at your door in brown paper, no questions asked and no record kept. The same trip to the drugstore can furnish arsenic for the rats and barbiturates for your nerves. The counter sells what you ask for. The mailbox delivers what you ordered. Verification is simply not part of the transaction. The coupon is the whole system, and the coupon asks nothing. You clip it from the back of a magazine, an advertisement for a rifle or a pistol printed between the ads for sea monkeys and muscle-building courses, and you write in a name. It does not have to be your name. There is no one to check it against, no list to consult, no waiting period to endure, no question asked beyond how you intend to pay. You enclose a money order, drop the envelope in the mailbox, and a few weeks later a firearm arrives at your door wrapped in brown paper like any other parcel. This is not a loophole anyone is exploiting. It is simply how guns are sold. The mail order house ships to whoever sends the coupon, and the post office delivers the gun the way it delivers a sweater, and the transaction leaves no meaningful record anywhere, because the machinery for keeping a record has not been built and few think it needs to be. A man can arm himself under an invented name without ever standing in front of another human being, and the system regards this as ordinary commerce. The drugstore is not far behind. The same counter that sells the amphetamines and the barbiturates will sell you arsenic, marketed as rat poison and handed over without ceremony, along with strychnine and a small pharmacy of other substances. A modern store keeps under lock and key, or does not stock at all. You ask, the clerk reaches, you pay, you leave. The assumption behind the whole arrangement is that a customer who wants poison wants it for the rats, and the assumption is rarely tested, because testing it is not the clerk's job. Any of this today runs you straight into a thicket of law. The Gun Control Act of 1968 ended the mail-order trade in firearms, after a man named Oswald used exactly this method to buy the rifle he carried to Dallas, ordering it through the mail under an assumed name, the precise scenario the catalogues made routine. The modern buyer fills out forms, submits to a background check, waits, and is recorded, and the idea of a rifle simply arriving in the mail to whatever name you wrote on a coupon sounds like fiction. It was an advertisement in the back of a magazine, Mr. Pruitt at the drugstore counter pushes the box of rat poison across to you with the same friendly nod he gives the toothpaste. No register of who buys it, no second look, no flicker of anything but easy, friendly, and small-town courtesy, because to him it is merely stock, and you are merely a customer, and the rats are presumably real. He bags it next to your other items. He wishes you well. The transaction is as bland as buying gum. So the gun comes by mail and the poison comes from the corner, and neither requires you to be anyone in particular, to prove anything, to wait, to be checked, to be remembered. The whole apparatus of verification a modern person takes for granted, the form, the background check, the waiting period, the locked cabinet, simply does not exist yet, and into its absence you can order, by coupon and by counter, a startling quantity of harm addressed to whatever name suits you that afternoon. It is burning day, and you carry the week's trash out to the rusted steel drum at the back of the yard and set it alight. Everyone on the block has a barrel and a column of smoke rising from it, full of paper and food and whatever plastic the kitchen produced. When the car needs an oil change, the old oil goes down the storm drain or onto the gravel, because it has to go somewhere. There is no agency to call and no rule to break. The ground and the air take whatever you give them. There is no trash collection in the sense a later person would mean it, no sorted bins and no blue trucks and no distant facility that makes your week quietly disappear. There is the barrel. Every backyard on the block has one. A rusted steel drum with the bottom punched full of holes for the draft, standing in the weeds at the edge of the lot like a patient iron stove, and burning day is the day you carry out the week and feed it in. Everything goes. The newspapers and the cereal boxes, the chicken bones and the potato peelings, the broken toy and the worn-out shoe and whatever painted, treated plastic thing the household has finished with, all of it tipped into the drum together and touched off with a single match. sending up a column of smoke that leans in the evening breeze and joins the other columns leaning up from the other yards, until the whole neighborhood is signing its name across the sky in grey. Nobody experiences the smoke as anything but the honest smell of a household keeping current with itself. It is a tidy smell, a responsible smell, the smell of a family that does not let things pile up. The fact that a good deal of what is going up the column is melting plastic, and that the sweet acrid edge riding the air is a soup of compounds with long unpronounceable names drifting straight in through the kitchen screens, does not register as anything at all, because pollution is not yet a word a person points at their own backyard. Pollution is what a factory does, somewhere else, to a river you do not swim in. This is just burning day, as ordinary, seasonal and wholesome as raking leaves, and the children go right on playing in the yard a few feet from the drum, darting through the warm grey haze, poking the fire with sticks the moment you turn your head, breathing the whole bright afternoon in without a thought, because nobody has ever given them a reason to hold their breath. The car gets disposed of by the same easy logic, which is the logic of a way. When the oil wants changing, your husband runs it out of the pan into an old coffee can and pours it off wherever is nearest and lowest, down the storm drain at the curb, or onto the gravel of the drive where it spreads its slow black rainbow, or into the ditch at the back where the cattails grow, because the oil has to go somewhere, and somewhere is anywhere that is not here. The leftover paint goes the same way, and the turpentine and the bug killer and the strange half can of something from a project 2 summers gone. You pour it out, you rinse the can, and you feel, doing it, the clean conscience of a person who has tidied up, because no one has ever once suggested there is anything to feel otherwise. Mr. Kowalski next door is out at his own barrel as you tend yours, a long stick in one hand for the poking and a cold beer in the other for the tending, and he raises the beer to you through the drifting smoke in the timeless salute of one man to another across a property line, the two of you engaged in the small weekly sacrament of making things vanish by setting them on fire. He has burned his trash this way every Saturday of his grown life. His father burned it the same way before him, in a barrel that might even be this same barrel, and it has never once crossed either of their minds that there might be another way, or that another way might one day be demanded of them. The smoke off his drum and the smoke off yours drift together somewhere above the fence and become one smoke, indistinguishable, climbing companionably into an evening that nobody is measuring, that nobody has thought to measure, that nobody yet owns the instrument to measure. So the wheat goes up the column and the oil goes down the drain, and the whole street disposes of itself quietly into the air and the soil and the groundwater with the untroubled good cheer of people who have been handed a green, generous, and forgiving world and absolutely no instructions for its keeping. The ground drinks the oil, the sky takes the smoke, the storm drain accepts whatever you pour into its dark little mouth and carries it off, gurgling, toward wherever such things are assumed to end up, some accommodating elsewhere that is always conveniently downhill, always just out of sight, always, comfortably, someone else's afternoon. You send the children out after breakfast and you do not see them again until the streetlights come on. They are 6 and 8, and they roam the whole town on bicycles, cross the highway, vanish into the woods and the construction sites and the creek, and nobody thinks to ask where. The older one already works a few hours at the family store, which is fine, because the rules about that are loose. Supervision, in the modern sense, is not a thing anyone has named yet. The day belongs to the children, and the dark returns them. The morning handoff is simple and total. You feed the children breakfast, you open the door, and they leave, and the terms of their return are not a time but a condition, the street lights, which is to say you will see them when the day is structurally over and not 1 minute before. In between, their whereabouts are unknown to you and uninteresting to anyone, because the entire town runs on the same arrangement, a loose continent of unsupervised children roaming freely across it from breakfast to dark. What they do out there would populate a modern neglect file by lunch. They ride bicycles without helmets at speed down real hills into real traffic. They cross the highway. They play in the storm drains and the half-built houses and the gravel pits and the woods, lighting small fires, building things that collapse, swimming in water nobody is watching, conducting the entire dangerous curriculum of a childhood that no adult attends. If one of them breaks an arm, he walks home with it, because finding an adult would only delay getting back to whatever broke the arm. Work folds into this seamlessly. The older one already puts in a few hours at the family store or the neighbour's farm, stocking shelves, hauling crates, running the register, the kind of child labour that survives precisely because it wears the friendly clothes of helping out and chores and learning the value of $1. The rules around what a child may do for money are loose where they exist at all and looser still on a farm, and a boy of 10 with a real job and real calluses is regarded not as exploited but as well raised. The variables invert completely now. The modern parent who turns 2 young children loose until dark with no idea where they are can attract a visit from someone official, and the line between a free-range childhood and neglect has been redrawn so far toward caution that the ordinary day here, the bikes and the highway and the unwatched creek, now reads as a catalogue of everything not to do. The childhood the era considers healthy, the modern era considers a series of near misses. Mr. Petrakis at the corner store hands your 10-year-old a broom and a quarter and a job to do, ruffling the boy's hair as he sets him to sweeping. The whole arrangement sealed with a wink and a soda, a transaction that is part employment and part affection and entirely unregulated. He has had neighbourhood boys sweeping his floor for 30 years. He pays them in coins and attention. Nobody has ever filed anything, because there is nothing in this world to file. So the children scatter at breakfast and reassemble at dark, scuffed, sunburned, and entirely unaccounted for, having spent the day at the exact centre of every hazard the future will invent a rule against, and they come home hungry and intact and proud of a scraped knee, and you feed them and send them up to bed without once having known where they were. The day belonged to them. The dark brings them back. And tomorrow, after breakfast, you will open the door and do it all again. The most ordinary parenting in the world, supervised by nothing but the streetlights and luck. You tuck the children into bed in soft brushed flannel pyjamas, the cozy kind, the kind that happens to ignite with enthusiasm if a sleeve finds a heater or a match or the pilot light on the stove. Nobody has tested the fabric for this, because no one is required to. The crib in the corner was built to no particular standard. The paint on it is the leaded kind, and the whole nursery has been assembled out of good intentions and zero regulation. You kiss them goodnight in a room that means them no harm and guarantees them none. The pyjamas are the softest thing the children own, brushed flannel washed to a perfect fuzz, and that fuzz is the problem, because a loose raised fibre catches a flame far faster than a smooth one, and the whole cosy garment will, given a spark, go up the way dry grass goes up. No one has tested it. No one is required to. The sleepwear is sold on its softness and its warmth and its cheerful print, and the question of how it behaves near the stove or the heater or the bedside candle is a question the law has not yet thought to ask the manufacturer. And the bedroom around them is built to the same standard, which is to say no standard at all. The crib in the corner was assembled to whatever dimensions its maker preferred, with slats spaced however they happen to be spaced, hardware that may or may not hold, finished in the bright leaded paint that every crib wears. None of it has passed through any agency or met any rule, because the agency does not exist and the rule has not been written. The nursery is an act of love, assembled entirely out of good intentions. This is the quiet thread running under the whole day you have lived. Not malice anywhere, not a single villain, just the absence of the apparatus a later country will build, the testing and the standards and the agencies and the warnings, the entire invisible scaffolding of modern safety that nobody misses because nobody yet knows it is missing. The era is not careless on purpose. It is careless the way a person is careless in a room they do not know is full of edges, moving with perfect confidence through a house wired, painted, fueled, and furnished with things no one has thought to be afraid of. Try to assemble this nursery today, and half of it would be recalled, because the Consumer Product Safety Commission, created in 1972, now tests the crib, regulates the slat spacing, bans the leaded paint, and requires children's sleepwear to resist a flame, instead of inviting one. The modern child sleeps inside a fortress of standards built up over decades. The safety is invisible, taken for granted, and absolutely everywhere. Here, in this room, it is absolutely nowhere. So you tuck them in, the flammable flannel and the unregulated crib and the leaded rails, and you do it with a tenderness that has nothing to do with any of that, because you are not putting your children to bed in a hazard. You are putting them to bed in the best room you could make them, warm and bright, and yours. The distinction matters only from the future, which is the one place that can see the whole picture. From inside the room, on this ordinary night, there is only a parent and 2 sleepy children and a soft light going off. You kiss them goodnight in a nursery that means them no harm and guarantees them none. the day's 100 small legal dangers folded up and put away, and you stand in the doorway a moment the way parents do, watching them breathe. They are safe tonight, because most nights are safe, because the odds, even here, even now, are mostly on your side. You turn off the light, you pull the door to, and the house holds them through the dark exactly as well as a house assembled out of love and no regulation can, which is to say, on this particular night, well enough. You spent the day driving home tipsy with a baby on your lap, dosing that baby with opium, feeding the household amphetamines for breakfast and barbiturates for dessert, chasing a fog of pesticide down the street, and checking the children's shoes on a working X-ray machine. You bought your son uranium, you smoked in the maternity ward, and not 1 minute of it, not a single solitary minute, was against the law. It is easy, from here, to laugh at all of it, and we have. But the people who actually lived this day were not reckless. They were doing their best with the rules they were handed, loving their children inside a world that had not yet learned half of what it was doing, which is the same thing people have always done in every year there has ever been. Every warning label, every buckle, every locked cabinet and flame-tested pajama came later, and each one was written because someone, in a kitchen or a nursery a lot like this one, found out the hard way. The quiet safety you sleep inside tonight is just the long memory of all the things this gentle, smoky decade did not yet know. Thank you for spending this strange and beautifully unregulated evening with me. There is nothing left for you to do now, no fog truck to wave at, and no shoes to check, only the warm dark and the soft weight of the blanket. So let your shoulders drop. Let the day and the decade and the whole long list of things that would land you in front of a judge fade quietly out of the room. Let your breathing go slow. Let your eyes close. You made it through the 1950s, alive and unarrested, which is more than the law strictly required. Sleep well,